We're restructuring for the digital age, the new chief operating officer announced during the Monday morning executive meeting. We need leaders who understand modern supply chain management, not dinosaurs stuck in the past. He was looking directly at me when he said it. My name is Robert Kane. I'm 54 years old, and for the past 20 years, I've been the Director of Supply Chain Operations at Meridian Industrial Solutions in Phoenix, Arizona. I built their entire distribution network from scratch, managed over $400 million in annual logistics, and maintained relationships with suppliers across 3 continents. But apparently, that made me a dinosaur. The new COO was Tyler Hamilton, 29 years old, fresh from Stanford Business School, and married to CEO Patricia Meridian's daughter. He'd been with the company for exactly 4 months and had spent most of that time creating PowerPoint presentations about supply chain optimization and digital transformation initiatives. Tyler continued his presentation, clicking through slides filled with buzzwords and industry jargon. We're implementing AI-driven demand forecasting, blockchain-enabled vendor management, and automated inventory optimization. The era of relationship-based procurement is over. I raised my hand. Tyler, our current supplier relationships have saved us over $12 million in the past 3 years through negotiated pricing and priority allocation during shortages. That's exactly the old-school thinking we need to disrupt, Robert. Tyler replied with a condescending smile. Modern supply chains are data-driven, not relationship-driven. We can achieve better results through algorithmic optimization. After the meeting, Tyler called me into his office. The walls were covered with charts showing supply chain metrics he'd copied from consulting firm presentations, none of which reflected our actual operations. "Robert, I'll be direct with you," Tyler began, not inviting me to sit down. "Your approach is holding the company back. While everyone else is embracing the future, you're still operating like it's 2004. Our supply chain performance metrics are the best in the industry," I replied. 99.7% on-time delivery, 2.1% cost variance, 0 safety incidents. But your vendor diversification index is suboptimal, and your procurement cycle times exceed industry benchmarks. I stared at him. Tyler was reciting metrics from a textbook without understanding what they meant in practical terms. "Tyler, those benchmarks don't account for our specific requirements. We deal with specialized industrial equipment, not consumer goods. Our extended procurement cycles exist because we vet suppliers for quality and reliability." "That's defensive thinking," Tyler said, waving dismissively. "Modern supply chains are agile and adaptive. We can't be constrained by legacy relationships and outdated processes." 2 weeks later, I was called into a meeting with Tyler and HR Director Jennifer Walsh. The termination was presented as a strategic realignment. "We're moving in a different direction," Tyler explained. "We need supply chain leadership that can drive digital transformation and optimize for the modern marketplace." "What about succession planning?" I asked. "My knowledge of our supplier network and contract negotiations will be documented and systematized," Tyler interrupted. "We're moving away from institutional knowledge dependency towards scalable process management." I was offered 8 weeks severance and a positive reference letter. 20 years of building critical business relationships reduced to a corporate restructuring footnote. What Tyler didn't understand was that supply chain management in our industry wasn't about algorithms and optimization software. It was about trust, reliability, and problem-solving under pressure. And those relationships I'd built over 2 decades were about to become very valuable to someone else. I joined Meridian Industrial Solutions in 2004 when it was still a regional distributor struggling to compete against much larger companies. The founder, Patricia Meridian, had hired me specifically because of my experience managing complex supply chains for specialized equipment. "We can't outspend the big guys," she'd told me during my interview. "But we can outservice them if we're smart about our supplier relationships." For 20 years, that philosophy had worked perfectly. I'd developed partnerships with manufacturers across Asia, Europe, and North America. When Hurricane Katrina disrupted Gulf Coast operations in 2005, my relationships with alternative suppliers kept us operational while competitors faced months-long delays. When the 2020 pandemic created global shortages, the trust I'd built over 15 years gave us priority allocation on critical components. These weren't just vendor relationships, they were strategic partnerships built on mutual respect, consistent communication, and reliable performance. When David Chen at Kyoto Precision needed emergency financing for a facility expansion, I'd helped him connect with Meridian's banking partners. When Sarah Martinez at Delta Manufacturing faced a quality control crisis, I'd flown to their facility to work directly with their engineering team. But Tyler Hamilton saw those relationships as inefficiencies that could be optimized away. The day after my termination, my phone started buzzing with calls from suppliers who'd heard the news through industry channels. "Robert, this is David Chen from Kyoto Precision. I just heard you're no longer with Meridian. What happened?" "Company restructuring. They decided to go with a more technology-focused approach." A long pause. "Who's taking over the partnership management?" "Tyler Hamilton, their new COO. He has some innovative ideas about supply chain optimization." "I don't know Tyler Hamilton. I know you. We've worked together for 12 years. Similar conversations followed throughout the week. Sarah Martinez, Hans Moeller from Stuttgart Engineering, James Park from Pacific Components, 20 years of relationships reaching out to understand what had happened and what it meant for future partnerships. I didn't recruit them. I didn't badmouth Meridian. I simply told them the truth. I was no longer with the company, and they'd need to work with my replacement going forward. But I also mentioned when asked that I was considering opportunities in supply chain consulting. Within a week, I'd received 15 LinkedIn messages from former suppliers asking about my plans. 9 of them requested meetings to discuss future collaboration opportunities. Meanwhile, Tyler was implementing his digital transformation at Meridian. He'd hired a consulting firm called Optimize Solutions to install new procurement software and redesign our vendor management processes. The system cost $400,000 and promised to revolutionize supply chain efficiency through data-driven decision-making. What Tyler hadn't done was speak directly with any of our key suppliers about the transition. I registered Kane Supply Chain Partners as an LLC and rented a small office in Scottsdale. Within 2 weeks, I had my first contract, a 6-month supply chain strategy engagement with Phoenix Manufacturing, a company that had been trying to break into our industry for years. "We've been watching Meridian's supplier network," their CEO told me. "If you could help us develop similar relationships." More contracts followed. A mid-sized construction company needed help diversifying their vendor base. A technology firm wanted to establish manufacturing partnerships in Asia. An aerospace contractor was looking for supply chain expertise to support a major government contract. By month 2, I was generating more revenue than my old salary at Meridian, while keeping 100% of what I earned instead of working for someone else's equity. I hired my first employee, Lisa Rodriguez, a logistics coordinator I'd worked with on several projects. Then Marcus Thompson, a procurement specialist who understood international trade regulations. Meanwhile, Meridian was discovering the limitations of algorithmic optimization. Patricia Meridian called me 6 weeks after my departure. "Robert, I need to ask you something confidentially. Have you been contacted by any of our suppliers about relationship transitions?" I chose my words carefully. "I've spoken with several former partners who wanted to understand the changes at Meridian. I've been focused on building my own practice. Because we've had some unexpected complications with vendor negotiations." I wasn't surprised. Tyler's new procurement system treated all suppliers as interchangeable vendors competing purely on price and delivery metrics. He'd terminated several long-term partnerships in favor of lower-cost alternatives that looked better in his optimization algorithms. What kind of complications? Quality issues with new suppliers, delivery delays. 3 major contracts are behind schedule because of component shortages. "I'm sorry to hear that, Patricia. Is there anything I can do to help?" A pause. "Actually, there might be. Could we meet for coffee? Unofficially, we met at a quiet cafe in Paradise Valley, far from either of our offices. Patricia looked tired, older than I remembered from our last meeting. Tyler is brilliant, she began, but he doesn't understand our industry. He's treating supply chain management like software development, all about efficiency and optimization. That approach works for some businesses, I said diplomatically, but not for ours. Our clients are building critical infrastructure with equipment that needs to last decades. They need suppliers they can trust, not just the lowest bidder. I nodded but said nothing. Robert, I made a mistake letting Tyler push you out. I got caught up in his vision of modernization without considering what we might lose. What are you thinking, Patricia? I'm thinking we need to find a way to rebuild what we've lost. What would it take for you to come back? I sipped my coffee, considering the offer. 6 months ago, I would have been grateful for the chance to return to Meridian with better terms. Now, everything had changed. Patricia, I appreciate the conversation, but I'm not interested in coming back as an employee. Her face fell. Is it the compensation? We could significantly increase your package. It's not about money, it's about autonomy. I've learned that I can better serve my clients when I'm not constrained by corporate politics and family dynamics. Then what about a consulting arrangement? You could manage supplier relationships while Tyler handles the operational systems. I shook my head. Tyler made it clear that relationship-based procurement is obsolete. I don't think our approaches are compatible. Patricia stared into her cup. So what happens to the partnerships we're losing? That depends on Tyler. If he's willing to adapt his approach and rebuild trust, maybe you can recover some relationships. If not, I shrugged. Robert, I have to ask, are you actively recruiting our suppliers? I'm running a supply chain consulting business. When former partners ask about working together in new capacities, I consider those opportunities like any businessman would. A month later, Tyler called me directly. His tone was very different from our last conversation. Robert, this is Tyler Hamilton from Meridian. I was hoping we could discuss a partnership opportunity. What kind of partnership? We handle the procurement systems and operational management. You handle the supplier relationships and strategic partnerships. We could split project revenues 70-2. I almost smiled. That's an interesting proposal. But I'm curious, what changed your mind about relationship-based procurement? A pause. I may have underestimated the complexity of supplier management in this industry. Meaning we've lost 4 major supplier partnerships in 6 weeks, and our replacement vendors aren't meeting quality standards. 2 client projects are delayed because of component issues. I checked my calendar. I could meet Thursday to discuss specifics. We met in Tyler's office, which looked different now. The optimization charts had been replaced with supplier performance reports and quality control metrics. He looked exhausted. I've been reviewing our historical supplier relationships, Tyler began. The partnerships you maintained had performance metrics significantly above industry averages, and the cost savings from your negotiated contracts were actually greater than what our optimization algorithms projected. I may have been too focused on procurement efficiency without considering total value creation. I nodded. Supplier relationships in this industry aren't just about transactions. They're about problem-solving partnerships, quality assurance, and long-term capability development. I'm starting to understand that, Tyler admitted. But we've already damaged several key relationships. I'm not sure they can be rebuilt. Some can, some can't. It depends on how the transitions were handled and whether there's still mutual trust. Tyler leaned forward. What would it take to repair the relationships we've damaged? Time, humility, and demonstrated commitment to partnership rather than pure cost optimization. But Tyler, I should mention that several of your former suppliers are now working with my consulting practice. His face went pale. Which ones? The ones who were most concerned about Meridian's new direction. They needed reliable partners for their own clients, and they couldn't wait for you to figure out your approach. Over the following month, Tyler's digital transformation hit more obstacles. The optimization software that had cost $400,000 couldn't handle the complexity of our specialized equipment requirements. Quality issues with new low-cost suppliers led to two major client complaints. A critical project for the Arizona Department of Transportation was delayed by 3 months because a replacement vendor couldn't meet technical specifications. Meanwhile, Kane's Supply Chain Partners was thriving. We'd signed partnerships with 12 companies, including 3 former Meridian suppliers who'd brought their entire client networks with them. Our revenue was approaching $200,000 per month, and we were getting requests for projects faster than we could handle them. The breakthrough came when Patricia Meridian called an emergency board meeting. I know because David Chen from Kyoto Precision gave me a heads up. Meridian owed his company $1.2 million for components they'd rejected due to quality standards that hadn't been properly communicated. They're trying to blame our manufacturing processes, David told me during our quarterly planning meeting. But the specifications they provided don't match the equipment requirements. It's clear they don't understand what they ordered. What are you going to do? File a claim for payment and terminate our supply agreement. We can't work with a company that doesn't understand their own procurement needs. That was the tipping point. When Kyoto Precision published their contract termination notice, citing incompatible procurement practices, 3 other suppliers followed within a week. Meridian lost access to critical components for their largest client contracts. 2 weeks later, Patricia Meridian called a press conference to announce strategic partnerships with leading supply chain consultancies. Kane's Supply Chain Partners was named as their primary vendor relationship management partner. The deal was structured as a consulting agreement, not an employment relationship. I maintained full autonomy over my client relationships and methodology, while Meridian got access to the supplier network I'd built over 20 years. Tyler remained as COO but in a reduced role focused on internal operations rather than external partnerships. He'd learned the expensive way that some business relationships can't be optimized away. The consulting contract was worth $150,000 per month, plus performance bonuses tied to successful project delivery. More importantly, it gave Kane's Supply Chain Partners the credibility and scale to compete for major contracts across the Southwest. 6 months after my termination, I was running a supply chain consulting firm with 8 full-time employees, 18 major clients, and annual revenue approaching $2.5 million. We'd grown by focusing on exactly what Tyler had called obsolete, building genuine partnerships based on trust, expertise, and long-term value creation. Tyler's optimization approach hadn't disappeared entirely. We now use data analytics and procurement software to enhance our relationship management, not replace it. The difference was that technology served the partnerships instead of substituting for them. Patricia Meridian summed it up perfectly during a client dinner. Robert didn't just manage our supply chain. He built a network of strategic partnerships that became our competitive advantage. We almost lost that by confusing efficiency with effectiveness. A year after my departure from Meridian, I received a LinkedIn message from Tyler Hamilton. He'd left the company to start his own consulting firm focused on human-centered supply chain optimization. Turns out the future isn't about choosing between technology and relationships, he wrote. It's about using technology to strengthen relationships. Thanks for teaching me that lesson, even though I was too arrogant to learn it initially. I responded, every industry has cycles of innovation and consolidation. The key is understanding what creates lasting value versus what just looks impressive in presentations. Today, Kane's Supply Chain Partners is recognized as one of Arizona's fastest-growing consulting firms. We've expanded into Texas and California, with plans for national operations within 2 years. When journalists ask about our secret, I always give the same answer. We remember that behind every supply chain decision is a person trying to solve real problems for their business. Our job is to help them succeed, not just optimize their metrics. Tyler had called me a dinosaur whose time was over. But in an industry increasingly dominated by algorithms and automation, human judgment and relationship skills had actually become more valuable, not less. Sometimes the most radical innovation is remembering what actually works and building modern capabilities around those foundations. The old ways aren't always obsolete. Sometimes they're just proven.